All right, how's everyone doing? All right, so next up is Tiffany Bridge. Tiffany Bridge spends her day thinking about the entire experience of using WordPress on Nexus's platforms and application. Tiffany digs through spreadsheets and data dumps, customer feedback chat logs, web page source code, and anything else you can find to decide what our most important next action is. She does the hard, boring slog of solving unexciting problems that impact the whole business so we can all get back to the fun of building new features. In her session today, her title is I Just Got This WordPress and Don't Know How to Use It. Let's give a warm welcome to Tiffany Bridge.
Okay, so what I'm not going to do is stand back here because you will not see me at all. Waking up my presentation. Can we switch to my slides? Ooh, now I have no slides. Waiting for my friends. There we go. All right, so the title of this presentation is I Just Got This WordPress and Don't Know How to Use It. Come on. I just got this slide remote and I don't know how to use it. It's not working. That's okay. We're going to make it work. We're going to make it do what it does. Okay, so who here is a total WordPress beginner? Yes, thank you. Who just are beginners in WordPress because you inherited a WordPress site from somebody else? You got a new job. Excellent. Okay, well, look, if no one has said this to you before, welcome to WordPress. You are part of the WordPress community now. You are WordPress. You are one of us. One of us. Okay, one of us. All right, here we go. What we'll be talking about today, we're going to talk about the basic concepts of WordPress and web hosting. We're going to be talking about important habits for keeping your WordPress site healthy. And we're going to be talking about how to identify and learn the specific editor in use on your WordPress site, because it's probably very different from one WordPress to the next. It's quite fragmented. Come on. There we go. What we're not going to be covering today is we're not going to be covering editing the content because there are like a gajillion different WordPress editors, and like I could spend a bunch of time teaching you how to use one of them, and then you could get back to your WordPress and be like, none of this makes any sense to me. And we're also not going to be digging too far into troubleshooting a broken site. That's a whole other talk that I do. Swipe. There we go. So who am I? I'm a product manager at Nexus, which is a managed WordPress web host. Before that, I worked at WordPress.com as a member of their special projects team, which means that I was doing a lot of just building websites for free for interesting people. It was kind of like influencer marketing. So I have been working with WordPress since 2004. I am completely self-taught. There were no boot camps when I was doing it. And I will tell you that what Caleb said, just break stuff, is the truth. You have to be ready to break stuff. But that is scary when you are working on a website that's like, maybe it's your job, or maybe somebody else built it and you don't know how to fix it. We're going to talk about all of that. Swipe. Okay, so has this ever happened to you? You log into WordPress the first time, and you get like all of this mess, right? Okay, what do we have here? We've got 10 comments, 10 updates, 4 plugins that need to be updated. There's something wrong with my Instagram feed. I have to update the WooCommerce database. What the heck does that mean? Okay, look, don't panic. It's fine. It's fine. Happens to everybody. Happens to me twice a week. It's fine. You don't have to be scared. Most of this stuff you could probably just press the buttons to make it happen and it'll be fine. It's okay. But we will talk about that a little bit. First, though, let's do some vocabulary. There's WordPress. That's your software in your database. It's some PHP software that lives on a server and a database. That's the thing that holds all your content. And then there's like, we have this concept of the theme. That's your look and feel. That's what the WordPress looks like. That's the website part of WordPress. And then we have plugins, which are little bits of software that you install to your WordPress to make it do more things. It is the cause of and solution to every WordPress problem is a plugin, okay? WordPress site's broken? Probably a plugin. Need WordPress to do something it doesn't do? You need a plugin. Plugins are probably the defining feature of WordPress and what has made it as successful as it is, but it's also like a whole lot of like third-party software built by people at varying skill levels. Sometimes they conflict, sometimes they cause problems, sometimes they get abandoned, they don't get updated. As a person who is managing a WordPress site, you're gonna spend a lot of time thinking about plugins just to prepare you. And then there's your content, right? That's the stuff all your website's for. That's your text, that's your images, that's all that fun stuff that's the reason the website exists. So think about, just make sure you're kind of on top of those concepts as a WordPress person. You will hear them a lot. My phone went to sleep and my remote stopped working. Okay, cool. So inside your big WordPress website, you have to put it someplace to get it on the internet. That's called hosting. Hosting is the people that you pay for server space. I work at a host. There are several hosts here. There are lots of us. Come talk to us. We like to sponsor WordCamps. That's where your website goes. And then you have a domain name, which you can think of as the address of your website. That's like www.yourwebsite.com. Yourwebsite.com is a domain. You have to buy one of those and point it at your website. Everybody with me so far? Sweet. I'm looking around. My glasses are dirty. I can't see into the room. All right, so what do you do with all that? Now we have vocabulary. What do we do? When you log into the website, the WordPress website, you've got to assess what you have. Just figure out what's going on, right? So, step one, come on, remote. Where is it hosted? Do you know? You got to find that out. You can use whoishostingthis.com. That's literally a website, whoishostingthis.com. You type in the domain name, and it'll make its best guess at who is hosting it. It's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty good. It's a good start. But also, somebody's paying that hosting bill. It's getting charged to a credit card. Figure out whose credit card it is. They'll be able to tell you who's hosting it, because they'll be paying GoDaddy or Nexus or Bluehost or any of those places. So that's what you want to find out. Because then the next thing is you got to find out what's included in your hosting plan, right? Are there backups? Backups, probably the second most important thing I'm going to say today. Because anything you break on the website can be fixed if you have a nightly backup. The most important thing I'm going to say today, though, is there a staging site? If you do not remember any other phrase that you hear today, remember the phrase staging site. If you're going to take a picture, take this picture, okay? Staging site. And here's why. Here's why staging site is so important. A staging site is just a copy of your website that doesn't have the domain attached to it. So what that means is, you know how Caleb talked about breaking stuff? The staging site's where you break stuff. Break all the things on the staging site. Get in, edit, mess around in the code, do whatever you want. Because if you break the staging site, you just fix it. It's fine, not a big deal. You just copy it back down from production. This is the most important thing I'm going to tell you today, is about staging sites. Next, are there software updates to be done? Do you remember our screenshot with like all the little red bubbles? The little red bubbles usually mean that there are updates to be done. This is where the dragons are. Don't be scared to do them. Do the updates, but do them on staging first. Because if you update everything on staging and the site still works, all you have to do is update it on production. And it should all still work there. If it breaks on staging, you have work to do. Come on. Oh, my phone went to sleep. And now my remote doesn't work. Okay, the next thing is, do I have access to tech support? Who else is working on this website with you? Do you have, if you're very lucky, there's an IT department whose job it is to keep the WordPress happy. Or maybe there is an agency or a developer that you have access to, if you are very lucky. If not, there is at least tech support at your host. And if you're with a host that's worth their salt, a lot of them aren't, I'm sorry to say, but if you are with a decent host, they will at least help you identify which plugin is the problem, because like 95% of the time, it is a plugin that is the problem. But so we want to see what kind of tech support resources you have access to. I talk too long, and then my remote stops working. Come on, there we go. Which editor is the site using? Okay, so here's, this is fun. So this right here, this screenshot here, is the default WordPress editor. It's the block editor, you'll hear it called. Sometimes you'll hear it called Gutenberg. But this is what it looks like. It's a very like WYSIWYG kind of situation. You add features as blocks. It's kind of like a concept of using Lego blocks to build a page. And that is what installs by default with WordPress. There is also the classic editor. This is what the WordPress editor looked like more or less until about, what was it, late 2018? That this was the WordPress editor. And it was just a basic text box, so pretty easy to understand. And then there's other stuff. There's third-party ones. This is called Elementor, which is a very common third-party editor. It's a visual editor, but there's a lot more than this. There's one called Beaver Builder. There's WP Bakery. There's Breezy. There's Aveda. I could go on. There's like tons of them. And that's why we are not getting into how to edit in WordPress today, because your editing experience will change based on which one of these you have. So my advice is figure out which editor you're using, job number one, and then start looking for resources that are specific to that editor. The internet is full of tutorials, and I really believe that like 80% of learning WordPress is developing really, really strong Google skills. Would you agree? Yeah, see, Caleb is like, yeah. Step 2, get your house in order. Now that you've done all of your assessment, you want to make sure you take a backup. Is your host backing things up nightly? Great. Do they have a thing that'll let you back up again immediately before you start working? Do that. If there are not backups at your host, stop. Get a backup plugin, take a backup. Because if you don't have a staging site, or if you break something on production, this is how you're going to fix it. So always make sure you have a complete backup. Okay, create a staging site. Remember how we said that was like the most important thing I'm going to say? Create a staging site. It's so important. I'm dancing while I say it. Create a staging site, because that's where you're going to do all of your work. Start updating things one at a time. You're going to go to your plugin update screen, and you're going to pick something, and you're going to update just that one thing. And then you're going to check on your staging site, because you're updating it on your staging site, remember. Go look at your site. Does everything seem like it still works? Great. Continue on updating things. Now look, you absolutely can do the YOLO method, by which I mean you click update all and just walk away and get a sandwich. I do it all the time. 90% of the time it's fine. But if you have a big complicated site with lots and lots of plugins, like basically the more plugins you have on the site, the less likely it is that the YOLO method is going to work for you. I keep my WordPress sites very few plugins, very high quality plugins. I've been doing this a long time. All the plugins on it are plugins I chose. If you are inheriting a WordPress site and you are updating the plugins for the first time, don't do the YOLO method. It will only end in tears. Okay, so now note anything to follow up on. Do you have plugins that are like pro plugins that require a license to update? This happens a lot, where there'll be like a free version and a pro version, and then maybe like the freelancer who built your site used their plugin license to build it and then took it with them, and now you don't have a license to get updates anymore. This is an important thing to follow up on, because sometimes those pro plugins do end up with like security issues and things like that and need to be updated, and you need a license to update them. Any updates that can't be run because they break the site. Any other questions you have, just make a list, because that's where you're going to start Googling. Okay. And now you can start working on content editing. Now that everything is up to date and happy and running smoothly, this is when you can start getting into content editing. And the reason I put content editing last on this list is because if you are editing content and stuff starts acting weird and you go to whatever support is available to you, right? It might be plugin support, it might be hosting support, and you're having trouble with your editor experience and your editing plugins are out of date, the first thing they're gonna tell you is, update your plugins. That issue is fixed in this release. Make sure your stuff is up to date before you start editing the first time. Or make sure you have found out that updating your plugins breaks your site so you can get that situation under control. Now, finally, you have updated all your stuff. You have figured out your editor. You know how to edit your content. Now you can regularly manage your site. Make sure that you have a regular cadence of backups and updates. Is your host running them nightly? Great. Still get a second backup option. I work for a host, and I will tell you that our backup service is great. However, our backup service is meant for us in case something breaks on our end. And sometimes the thing that breaks on our end, it happens rarely, but it does happen. Sometimes the things that breaks on our end is the backup service. And we don't necessarily notice until something needs to be backed up and can't be backed up. So I definitely always recommend 2 forms of backup, one with your host and one that you control at a third party. Then you're gonna find some tutorials for WordPress and your editor. The internet is full of this content. The Learn team, Courtney, what's up? Great source to start because that's gonna be like your official stuff. However, the Learn team is really focused on like core WordPress, right? And sometimes what you need tutorials on is your third-party editor or your third-party plugin, things like that. So you're gonna look for the content that deals with those things as well. The internet is full of that stuff. So make sure you're out there finding it. There's some really great sources. I use, in addition to the Learn stuff, I use like WP Beginner when I just don't know how to do something. WP Beginner has a lot of like affiliate marketing in it, so sometimes the recommendations aren't amazing, but they will get you started. Leverage that staging site to get brave and experiment. Break stuff. This is where you're gonna break stuff. Please break stuff. If you aren't breaking stuff on staging, are you even trying hard enough? Okay? This is like, it's a sandbox, it's there for you. The staging site exists so that you can like mess around and be like, I wonder what happens. Oh, did my computer just go to sleep? No napping, no napping. Okay. Well, I have it here, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on up there. But this is your place where you can get brave. And here's the thing, the only way to learn to use WordPress is to use WordPress. Get out there, use it. The way I taught myself WordPress was just by breaking things over and over and over again, learning to fix them, and then breaking them some more. Now, when I was teaching myself WordPress, in fairness, there was a lot less WordPress. It was 2004, and plugins were only just starting to become a thing. But it's never too late to learn. And the staging site is how you get there because you don't have to be afraid of anything that happens on staging. You break a production site, like a live site, your client's freaking out, your boss is freaking out, your customers are freaking out. You break the staging site, no one even notices. It's fine. Okay, and finally, you've totally got this. I believe if I can teach myself WordPress sitting at home after work with no money, no time, on like a borrowed computer, you can do it. You can do it. And now that you are part of the WordPress community, you have all this other help around you. People in WordPress love to help. And I think it can be really intimidating for beginners to get in because everybody's in there talking about, oh, I'm building a block theme, and let's talk about like theme.json. Okay, look, it's okay. Start with the Learn folks. The Learn folks in particular are very friendly. But you can learn this, I don't want to say easily, I will say with a little bit of effort. It's there, it's free. A lot of the best ways to learn WordPress are free. I believe in you. I have completely given up the pretense of using the remote now. Okay. Recap, questions, discussion. What is something you have learned today? What is something you wish you knew? Are there questions? We have. Yeah, and we can bring it to you, Michelle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's somebody right here.
Thank you for your good advice. I've had a site for quite a while, but I feel like I need to update things. I guess I'm still working in Classic Editor.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Can you shift to another editor and would those old pages stay the same, or how does that work when you?
So I believe, and this was the way it was when the block editor first became the core editor, was what would happen is anything that was older would get converted to this block that was just called the Classic Editor block. And so it was a very non-destructive way. Like if you go back and never touch those pages again, they will stay there in that Classic Editor block forever. You can continue even editing it that way. Totally fine. There's also a button that says convert to blocks. And what will happen is the editor will make its best guess on how to convert that Classic Editor page into a block-based page. Now, if you are using kind of the core editor, it actually does a really good job of doing that. But if you're using anything a little bit more complicated or a little weirder, sometimes it has problems, which is where their staging site comes in. Or, if you want to do it the cowboy way, if you want to live dangerously, you can do that on the live site and then just not save the changes. But the safest way is always going to be the staging site, if you like safety.
Can I ask another question?
You're holding the mic, so one more, sure.
I can, it's my mic. So I love the second backup suggestion. I use Updraft Plus.
Great, that's a good product.
And then the third question was, oh my gosh, there was another question I had and I don't remember.
Well, think on it. We'll bring it back to you. And so we'll go to Michelle and then to my gentleman here in the middle.
Sometimes when you inherit a website, you look at the users and there are a million different users at a million different levels. What would you suggest to somebody who's inheriting a website as far as kind of vetting through those and managing the user base when you don't know who everybody is?
This is a super, super great question, and I totally should have covered it. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, for those of you who don't know, has like a gajillion WordPress websites. So you look at your users and you're like, oh gosh, there's like 300 users here. Probably the most important thing is to sort them by what level of permissions they have. First, identify all the administrators. Is everybody on that list who is an administrator still with your organization? And if not, disable that account right away or like move it down to contributor level. You can delete users, but then WordPress starts asking you questions about what you want to do with their content, and maybe you're not ready to answer that yet. So just reduce the permission level down to contributor, and then anybody who logs into that user will not be able to do anything to impact your site. So the first thing is, yes, address the administrative users, and then just kind of continue on through. Editors and authors can publish content to the front of the site. So you want to make sure that everybody who has editor or author is authorized to be in your backend. And then you're going to have like contributor, subscriber, and things like that. And that's when you might find, generally it's fine to leave subscriber and contributor accounts pretty much where they are because they don't have a lot of privileges as long as you are keeping your plugins up to date, because sometimes the vulnerabilities in plugins allow those users to escalate their privileges, which is kind of a technical way of saying a contributor can become an administrator if you're not looking, and that's a problem. But in general, they're safe to leave there, but if you start to notice there's 100 of them and they all have @mail.ru as their email address, at some point you got hacked. You may not be hacked right now, but at some point you got hacked and you need to get rid of all of those users. Because one of the ways that WordPress sites get attacked is people will just start creating a bunch of junk users to see if they can, basically to see what they can get. And so if you see junk users, please do remove them. But also consider the kind of site that you're running. If you have a WooCommerce site, a lot of those users, those low privilege users, might be people who have bought things from you. So it's really important to consider the context. Who are these users? Are they customers? Are they people who don't belong there? So it's important to understand the functionality of the site as well. Does that answer your question, Michelle? I think you had a question here.
So my only experience with WordPress is with my wife when she's pulling her hair out, and she asked me to come into the room and see what if I can figure out. But so
I know nothing about WordPress, but I'll come help
Right.
you. Yes.
yeah, so she's in the session next door right now. But so her biggest problem that she has is with the plugins, and it seems like from this presentation that's what everyone's biggest problem is.
She's
But-
an extremely normal WordPress user.
Yes. So she's wondering if there's a way to know which plugins we should have, or at least from this presentation, it almost seems like, whatever ones pop up or ones that you have to add on, or...
Well, so if you are inheriting a WordPress site, there's probably a bunch of plugins in there already. And they were chosen by someone, and they were chosen for a reason. That reason may have been a bad one.
Okay,
It may have been a poor choice.
So is there a
but-
way to know which
Sure.
ones we need?
I mean,
Okay.
so yes, I didn't get too much into auditing plugins because that could honestly be an entire presentation on its own.
Gotcha.
However, if you just sort of a quick summary, first go through the list of plugins. Do you understand what they all do? This is another great use of a staging site, because if you don't know what all the plugins are for, get on your staging site and just start turning them off and seeing what happens. Just click
Okay.
deactivate,
Yeah,
see what
yeah.
happens. Now, with an SEO plugin, you won't necessarily notice any different on the front end, but whatever it's doing for you behind the scenes will stop. So you can't, this isn't the most reliable method,
Okay, understood.
but just start turning things off, see what happens. Another thing you can do is, like, sometimes what you'll see on plugins is that people will be like, SEO is great, more SEO is better. There's like 8 SEO plugins. You don't need that many. So one of the things that will be up to you as the new owner of the site is to decide which one is the most important. What I would recommend at that point, if you're not prepared to like do a deep dive into the functionality of each one, and you may not be, because who has time for that? My usual way of assessing the relative quality of a plugin as a non-developer who is not qualified to evaluate code is that I will, if you click through to the plugin details page on WordPress.org, there's like a block in the upper right that tells you when was the last time the plugin was updated, how many sites is it installed on, does it have a star rating, that sort of thing. And then as you scroll down, you can see, is the developer like actively supporting that plugin? Are they in the forums making sure people get the questions the questions they have answered? If the answer to all those questions is yes, it's probably a pretty good plugin.
Gotcha.
That doesn't mean that it's like amazing and super performant or whatever, but it's a good start, right? Like, start there. If the plugin hasn't been updated in like 3 years and 10 sites have installed it, stay away. Because it's probably been abandoned. Maybe it wasn't that good. But I think like for people who are just starting out and just kind of getting used to the idea of evaluating plugins, that's a good like proxy for quality.
Okay, thank you.
I see one here, and then one back there.
I thank you so much. I'm very new to WordPress,
Welcome.
very new to tech, if you can call it that, as much as my experience. But I want to know about staging. I want to know, how do I set up a staging site with WordPress?
Sure.
Now I use local now. Would it be better if I set up something with my hosting, or go to WordPress and do it?
So local, first of all, is a great choice because that means your staging site is locally on your computer. That will get you, I would say, 85 to 90% of the way there. So if you have that and you're comfortable using it, congratulations. I do advise having like an online, like at your hosting staging site, simply because then it is in an environment that is more like the one that your website is hosted in.
Okay.
And it's like, it's online, and it's going to have like the same kind of like infrastructure under it, which you can't necessarily guarantee on your local computer. But when I say staging, what I usually mean is like that is a feature that is included with most WordPress hosting plans. If you have a WordPress hosting plan that does not include a staging site, find one that does. I personally, and full disclosure, like my job is to decide what gets included in our WordPress hosting packages at my job. So I have very strong opinions about this, but in my opinion, every WordPress hosting plan should include a staging site. There should be a button in your hosting control panel that lets you create the staging in one click. And if there isn't, you're probably not on a very good plan. Now, I will say that the plans that include staging, they tend to be a little bit pricier. And by pricier, I mean like $20 instead of like $5. But I think that feature is so critical and so important for like your happiness as a person managing a WordPress site that it's worth the money.
Okay. Okay.
Hashtag worth it.
Okay, and once I set up the staging site and I set up the site itself, how easy is it once I go through my hosting? How easy is it to push it out? Do I just click a button and push it out? Like if I say that I'm finished and I want this.
So staging to production, which is what you're describing,
Right.
pushing staging to production, is a little bit of a stickier wicket. And the reason for that is, like, first of all, I have not yet found the host that has solved this problem. I have been trying to solve it. I haven't solved it. I'm not aware of any of my competitors who have solved it. It's usually not like, some hosts will give you the ability to copy staging back up to production, but I hesitate to tell people to do that because while you're over here working on stuff, however long it takes you, your live site is still out there and it's collecting orders, comments, whatever it is that site does, it's still doing it. And you don't have like a constant sync of that new data down. And so I generally advise people to not just push staging to production blanket like that, unless they are 1000% certain that they're not going to overwrite something that they need on production. So what I actually recommend for staging is literally just to use it as a sandbox, figure out how to do what you're going to do, then go back over to production and do it there. It's a little bit more work, but I promise you it is much safer.
Repeat that. Just that last part.
Just that
when
last
you
part.
said, right.
Do what you're going to do on staging, whether that's updating plugins, building a new page, whatever it is, and then go do it again on production. The only exception is if you are building a whole new site on staging. But even then, you want to make sure, like, if you have an e-commerce site, you want to make sure that, like, that customer data is safe. So that gets to be a little bit stickier. But the only time I would ever advise just pushing staging your production is if you have built a whole new site on your staging site and now you're ready to take it live.
Thank you.
Yes. There was a question back here. Was it you?
Yeah, I have a question. So thanks for doing this presentation. So the question I had was, it's sort of weird hearing myself talk.
Yeah, it is weird.
But so I know this isn't about the various different website editors, but in your opinion, is the Gutenberg block editor useful for like the majority of the scenarios that you'd be using WordPress for? Or
This is a
there...
very controversial question. Okay, me individually, I actually really love the Gutenberg editor. I know some people hate it. Some people refuse to move to it. Some people really are they just love their Elementor or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I respect all opinions. Mm-hmm. However, I love Gutenberg. I giggle using Gutenberg. Mm-hmm. I think, because I was with WordPress, you have to remember, I was using WordPress back before the classic editor even had like HTML. Like it was just text and you had to write your own code. Mm-hmm. So to me, like Gutenberg is magic. So I would say if you are starting out, please use Gutenberg. Please learn Gutenberg. Please love Gutenberg. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best way. Mm-hmm. If you don't already have habits from another editor. Mm-hmm. If you already have habits from another editor and you are just trying to get through your day, maybe that's not feasible for you. Maybe you're just like, I don't have time to learn this right now. That's okay. That is valid. But if you are starting from like not having a strong opinion about an editor, I would advise the block editor. Yes, I would.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask another question?
Go ahead.
This will be quick. Is it like a good combo? Say you use I know WordPress gives you their own default theme, but there's also like all these other themes that are on the plugin section or whatever.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Is using a custom theme and then using a compatible block editor theme with the Gutenberg block editor, is that like a really good?
Yeah.
Okay.
So because the way that WordPress handles themes has been changing over the last couple of years, the theme question has gotten a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the themes that you go out and buy commercially were written kind of with an assumption of a particular editor in mind. The default WordPress theme will always support the cutting edge
Okay.
of whatever is happening. But the default WordPress theme is the default WordPress theme, right? Using like third-party themes is one of the great parts of WordPress. I definitely encourage you to do it, but I would also encourage you to evaluate it kind of in a similar way to evaluating a plugin, right? Are people using it? Is the developer actively supporting it? Is it getting updated? And then do look to see, like, is this a classic theme? Is this like, they call them block themes, which is what we have this thing now in WordPress called full site editing. Like back in the day, the only way to edit the look of your site was to know PHP. And now there is a block editor-like experience for your site's appearance. Again, magic. I giggle while I'm using it. And then I tell everybody to get off my lawn because I am a WordPress graybeard. But yes, like use a third-party theme. Absolutely use a third-party theme. Just evaluate it carefully and make sure that it is designed to work with the editor you want to use.
Okay. Alrighty. Awesome. Thank you.
There's a question in front of you.
So with using a third-party theme, I have a client now who's on PHP 7.4. The theme has not been updated in 2 years.
I'm so sorry.
What do you do?
Okay, so like the correct answer is to either update the theme yourself.
But it's not, it doesn't support PHP 8.
No, what I mean is like find a developer, get them to update the theme. That's the most correct version. You could find a different theme for them to use. That can get complicated because sometimes content and themes are sort of married together. Or you could just hang out on 7.4 as long as your host will let you. But here's the thing, eventually your host is going to drop support for 7.4. So what I would do is get a staging site and then bump up to like PHP 8, 8.1, 8.2, see what breaks. Just see what breaks. And by seeing what breaks, it might not be obvious, so I would definitely check your PHP error logs. Do you know how to do that? Fab. Check that and see what's happening. Because you can see, like, is it actually a problem and how much of a problem is it? Because what can happen is, like, the site can look fine, but, like, meanwhile, there's, like, this hidden error that you're not seeing on the front end of the site, and it's filling up your log files. Before long, all of your hosting disk space is filled up with all of these log files. But so that's the first thing I would do, is just try it out on a staging site, try out a higher version of PHP, and see what the problem actually is. Because it might be a very simple thing that actually would only cost you a couple $100 to have fixed. So I would start there.
And their hosting has no support because it's HostGator.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm not going to slag on a competitor from the stage at WordCamp.
You can.
I'm not going to. This is being recorded and streamed. But I will say that if you are not satisfied with the support that you're getting from your host, finding other host is always an option. Anybody else? Oh, Christine.
Hypothetically.
Christine's my coworker, by the way.
Yeah, this is just hypothetically. Let's just say that a friend has a website that may have been hacked by like malware or something like that. When that happens, I don't know, is it against the host's toss or any toss to like do a staging site, like to try to fix it does that make sense? Like, cause I don't want to bring malware onto a completely different area.
So I would say, like, the thing about malware is that, like, it's not that it's harmless on a staging site, it's that it's much less accessible for the attacker to use. It's just harder for them to use on a staging site. And the nice thing about a staging site is that if it becomes a problem, you can delete it without consequence.
And trying to fix it is what I'm talking about. Like
Yeah, I
trying
mean,
to
definitely try to fix it. There
isolate it.
are multiple security plugins that you can use to scan. Scanning from a plugin is always going to be limited in what it can do, but it's a good start, particularly if you are not at a host that provides you with malware, any kind of like malware support. A good WordPress host, again, the ones at the kind of the pricier end versus like the $5 a month ones, will frequently like quarantine the malware and at least tell you what to do next. There are steps you can take to secure your site. Among them is update all your plugins, right? Because 95% of the time, a WordPress site that has been hacked, a plugin was out of date, and it was one with a serious security vulnerability in it. So if you keep your WordPress plugins up to date, you are much, much safer. You can do these things called like rotating salts, which like forces everyone to log out. You can reset passwords. There are things you can do. Getting into all the details about what to do is a little bit beyond the scope of today, but this is, again, a thing that you are capable of fixing. You may have to do a little bit of Googling, and if you really don't want to be bothered with it, there are people that will do it for a couple $100.
Is that you? I'm asking for a friend.
Me personally, I mean,
yeah.
if the friend is you, yes.
Hypothetically.
But not just like everybody. No.
Okay.
But like sometimes your host will have a partner and someone they can recommend. Sometimes they won't. But also like your meetup group is a great resource for that. Oh my gosh, I've been hacked. How do I help? Like meetup groups love helping with this kind of stuff. So like make friends at your meetup group, and they can, even if they can't help you, they can at least advise you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Right here.
Hi, thanks for the talk. A couple things that you reacted to. I inherited 2 sites from an employee who was sort of holding on to knowledge in order to keep his job because he was a really bad employee. And then he had to teach me how to use the site when he was finally kicked out. And of course, we don't want to turn to him for anything. And I know one way of doing everything, and I would really like to kind of recreate the entire site. The way you reacted to the thing about PHP, I don't even know what that is.
I'm happy to explain if that's your question.
That's one part of the question. And then the other thing that you reacted to was a theme that hasn't been updated in 2 years. Why would themes have to be updated? I know so little.
Happy to answer both of those questions.
So those are my questions,
sure.
basically.
So PHP is the language that WordPress is written in. If you heard Caleb speaking this morning, you know that it has been a dying language for 20 years. PHP gets updated because it is a technology, and like all technologies, it gets updated for the changing environment. And so things that happen in PHP are like certain things are discovered to be security risks. Those security holes get closed. Things that that happen are like, oh, we decided this isn't a very efficient way of doing it. With the way servers are now, we're doing it this other way. And honestly, probably Caleb is even better qualified to answer that question than I am. But the point is, PHP progresses in versions. And with it, WordPress also progresses in which version of PHP is expected to be used. And thirdly, hosts, like a PHP version goes what's called end of life. And what that means is the PHP project is no longer providing security fixes to that version. Which means if you're running it, if something else is discovered in it, too bad, so sad. Which is why you want to keep that up to date, and which is why WordPress wants to stay up to date and make sure that it is supporting the newest versions of PHP. So that's what that is. That's what that means. And so, because one of the things that does happen is like these PHP versions go end of life, and then hosts are like, we've got all these old versions of PHP sitting around on our customer sites, and we need to remove them. And so they will say, okay, you have 1 month, and then we're taking it away. And we're moving you to PHP 8, whether you like it or not. Better get ready. Please try to stay ahead of that curve. The second part of your question, why would a theme ever need to be updated? For the same reason. Security holes are discovered. New versions of WordPress come out that handle things a little bit differently. The editor handles things a little bit differently. This happens, block editor development is proceeding very quickly right now. It happens a lot. So themes get updated to accommodate new things, bugs get discovered, PHP versions change, they have to update the theme to accommodate the new PHP version. That's why a theme gets updated. So all of these things, like if you think about it, like people set up their WordPress site and they're like, I have a website. All I have to do is maintain the content on it. That is not how anything in tech works. The entire stack, the stuff you can see and the stuff you can't see, is changing all the time. The physical server has a hard drive that dies and it gets a new kind of hard drive. The operating system that's running on that server gets updated. PHP gets updated. The database software gets updated. WordPress gets updated. The themes and the plugins get updated. All of that happens all the time. It is all around us. It is an ecosystem. And that's why it's really important to stay on top of your specific little island in it. Anybody else? Well, thank you, everybody. I am here through lunch today. Then I have to leave because my little boy's going to his first sleepaway camp this weekend, and I want to get home before he leaves. But I am here through lunch, and I'm happy to chat one-on-one with you. Find me on Twitter. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm very searchable. My name is TiffanyBridge, and it was lovely being here with all of you.